there steps that can be taken to reduce the federal debt? I'm Jill Horner. This is Comcast Local Edition. With me this hour is United States Congressman Leonard Lance of New Jersey's 7th District. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me, Jill.
So talk to us a little bit about the debt and the challenges that the United States is facing at this point because of the economy and other factors in trying to reduce that debt. Are there steps that can be taken?
I certainly hope so. Our federal debt at the moment is $12 trillion, and it's rising rapidly. And the annual deficit last year was $1.42 trillion, and that is the largest it has been as a percentage of gross domestic product since 1945. It is estimated that this year the annual deficit will be over $1 trillion, and it may approach last year's $1.42 trillion. And this is unsustainable. I don't think anybody in Washington believes that we can balance the federal budget this year because of the depth of the recession. But so far we have done nothing to have a glide path back toward a balanced budget, which did exist in this country 10 years ago with the Democratic president, President Bill Clinton, and a Republican Congress under the leadership of Speaker Newt Gingrich. We need bipartisan cooperation to bring that type of situation about again.
So what we're really talking about is a long-term approach, because right now at this point we're facing costs for participation or troops in Afghanistan and Iraq and the costs associated with those conflicts. We're also talking about international economic challenges. So at what point could we potentially start to pay down the debt at a point where many Americans are at this point out of work and not able to actually pay their taxes?
Number one, we need to improve the American economy, and once the economy strengthens, then there will be more in tax revenues without raising taxes. I certainly don't favor raising taxes, but I think that the focus has to be on improving the American economy, and that will mean federal coffers will be stronger than they are now. But at the moment, we have no plan at all for moving forward toward a balanced budget. And raising the debt ceiling, which has recently occurred, was done in a hidden way in another bill, and I have always favored a standalone vote on raising the debt ceiling.
So explain to us how that process works, because periodically that debt ceiling is actually raised, but it's often in different pieces of legislation, defense appropriations, for example. Why take it out of those other pieces of legislation and have a standalone vote?
Because it's such an important issue, and it's hidden in another piece of legislation so that the public doesn't get a handle on what Congress is really doing. And for that reason, I oppose the recent increase in the debt limit. And over and above that, we need a fundamental discussion moving forward as to how we're going to balance our budget over time. And so far, that discussion has not occurred in Washington.
So in starting that discussion and in working to reduce that debt long term, what are some of the initial steps? Is taking that debt ceiling out of other pieces of legislation one of the first steps?
Absolutely, and I'm taking the lead in Washington to attempt to have a standalone vote. Number two, excess TARP funds or excess stimulus funds, they should be used to pay down the national debt as opposed to engaging in new programs, in my judgment. And number three, long term, we need to have discretionary spending at a percentage of gross domestic product so that we can have a glide path back toward fiscal responsibility. Otherwise, our children will live in a much diminished nation, and leadership will pass to some other part of the world, perhaps China or India. And as you know, other parts of the world are now purchasing federal debt, United States 30-year T-bills, Treasury bills, places like China, Saudi Arabia, and other countries. And long-term, this is disastrous for the next generation.
We just have a short time left, but how are you working to introduce the standalone vote for raising the debt ceiling?
I am a sponsor of that, and others as well. We've asked the Speaker of the House to have a standalone vote. Unfortunately, so far that has not occurred, but I encourage the public to support our efforts to make sure we have a glide path toward this successful goal.
Thank you. We've been talking with United States Congressman Leonard Lance. I'm Jill Horner for Comcast.